Hi, Be Health Empowered family. Welcome back to another week of Excuse Me, Doctor. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Clarke, and I am really pleased to welcome you back to Excuse Me, Doctor, where each and every week we are here on Monday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time, to make sure that you have all the facts, figures, science, evidence that you need when it comes to making decisions about your health. We are here to empower you to be your own best health advocate, to know what's going on, to be able to, with your bodies, and also at the same time, to be able to navigate the healthcare system if you have to. We're streaming on YouTube and Facebook. I want to welcome everybody who's tuning in for the first time. If you're on YouTube, please remember to hit subscribe. And if you're on Facebook, please hit that like button. I really appreciate you for doing that. Tonight, we're going to be talking about our topic, all vaxxed out. And we really want you all to participate by putting your comments in the chat. Of course, your questions. That's what we're here to do, to answer your questions. But we also want to hear from you when we get down to our topic of all vaxxed out and, what we should be doing or should we be doing anything to reach out to people who are not interested in getting vaccinated at all. So we're going to have a great producer show later on. Start writing your comments and questions in the chat. But to start off with, as we always do, we're going to have our weekly recap, and my wonderful producers, Miss Lila Mays and Mr. Wayne Bruce, are here to join me for that.
Hello.
Welcome, y'all.
Hey, Dr. Clarke.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi, everybody in YouTube and Facebook land.
How's everything over in LA?
Things in LA. Yeah. It's a little chilly over here in LA. It's feeling like East Coast in February a little bit.
Hey, welcome to the fold. Welcome to the fold.
That might be an exaggeration, but yeah. So did you people
we're going to kick off this.
Did y'all miss us?
What's that?
I said, did the people miss us last week?
I think so, but we're back, and we are back and starting with our usual weekly recap so they can get caught up on what's going on.
Indeed. And your producer dropped the ball, because what I should have done was got the number specifically for this date last year.
Yes.
But I didn't. We didn't do that.
We didn't drop. We didn't. We just dropped the ball on it.
But Dr. Mel can tell us what the cases are as of April 26, 2021.
Let's just assume that we're 32,789,000 more cases than we had this time last year.
Wow.
Which was probably around 653 cases, is my guess. The good news is that the weekly rise in cases is down by about 14%. So we're rising at a slower rate than we were before. That's great news. And then, of course, the deaths. Unfortunately, we're at 585,880 souls lost to COVID. But also that, too, the rate of the new numbers in terms of people dying every day is going down. We're down by about 4%. So
wow.
Both of those are heartening, definitely heartening.
Yeah. Yeah. So cases, death toll, where are we with vaxxers and anti-vaxxers? How many folks are vaccinated?
So we are in the neighborhood of over 93 million people who are fully vaccinated. So that's more than like 28% of the United States adults. So we're doing pretty good. Partially vaccinated, 40% of US adults, and over 65. So my seniors in the house, 65% of you all are fully vaccinated, which I think is pretty amazing.
Let's give it up for the seniors.
Give it up for the seniors.
Let's give it up.
Then, there's some states that are superstars in terms of their vaccination rate. So this week is Minnesota, Connecticut, and New Mexico. New Mexico always tends to be up there a little bit. And unfortunately, pulling up the rear, the caboose of the train is still Alabama and Georgia, with about 20% of their populations vaccinated. So they have a little ways to go.
Par for the course.
We need to have we need to get Stacey Abrams on the case.
We really do.
We need Stacey Abrams. Who's the Stacey Abrams of vaccines? That's the deal.
Vaccines, right?
Yeah,
right. Instead of get out to vote, get out to vax. That's what we need.
I'm going right now to coin that slogan.
You heard it here first.
So that brings us. We have the numbers, right? We all numbered up. Yeah. So that brings us to one of my favorite LL Cool J songs. Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for a couple months. That's J&J vaccine. J&J vaccine is back. So the CDC, you want to talk a little bit about that, Dr. Mel?
Yeah, well, it is back. The CDC just announced that, I think, at the end of the week of last week. And as you remember, it was paused because initially there were 6 women who were identified age 18 to 48, so all under 50, who out of 6.85 million doses experienced this rare side effect of blood clots forming in the brain at the same time as their platelets going low.
Wow.
And there was even a death as a result. So they paused it out of an abundance of caution, number one, to see if there were any more cases out there. And they found a total altogether of 15 cases. Those cases were of blood clots anywhere in the body, not just the rare brain one. It also gave doctors time to get educated on looking for and diagnosing these blood clots and how to treat them. And then it got the word out to the public that if you're short of breath, you have abdominal pain, you have leg or arm swelling, or a severe headache, those are all reasons to seek immediate medical attention if you had the J&J vaccine within the past 3 weeks.
Okay.
So all told, it was 15 cases out of 8 million. So about less than 2 cases per million, which is exceedingly rare. It's actually rarer than if you smoke, if you take birth control pills, if you're pregnant, or if you have COVID. All those give you blood clots way more often than the J&J vaccine. So for that reason, the FDA and CDC decided the benefits of vaccinating people with the J&J vaccine specifically far outweigh the risk. So when you vaccinate people, you are actually avoiding hundreds of hospitalizations and hundreds to thousands of hospitalizations and tens to hundreds of deaths. So that's why it's thought that the benefit outweighs any risk. And they're still trying to figure out, is there an actual link? They think there is, but they're not 100% sure. But even if it is, the numbers definitely say more people will be helped than harmed.
Okay.
So that's the reason why it was restarted.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is my Chrissy Teigen cringe face.
Okay. Well, and there's talk, I'll be honest with you, there's talk in the medical community of, should the CDC say, because it was all in women under 50, that, okay, we're just not going to give it to women under 50. So there's some people in the medical community who are pushing for that, in which case it would go to men of any age and women over 50. But that's yet to be determined.
Okay. All right, so that's that about the J&J vax. So, Dr. Mel, last year and actually during the duration of this pandemic, we've heard all of this stuff about people with respiratory issues and not being able to breathe. And I know a lot of asthmatics were really, really scared about contracting the virus. But it sounds like a lot fewer asthmatics had severe COVID. Is that right?
Yeah, a lot fewer than would be expected, given that asthma is a inflammation of the lungs, and COVID causes worse inflammation of the lungs. So you would think, right, that there would be a lot of people with asthma who ended up with severe COVID. Well, there were, but not as many as would to be expected. And so researchers looked into that, and it appears that there might be a medicine that some asthmatics are on a regular basis that might be protective. And that's called budesonide. It's an inhaled corticosteroid. And in a small trial of 146 people, they actually tested whether budesonide helps people to recover earlier from COVID, and found that it did help people recover a day earlier from their symptoms. They were less likely to have fever. They were less likely to need urgent medical care. So a lot more research has to be done, because 146 people is not a whole lot, but it does kind of point in a positive direction. And if it pans out, and that's a big if, it might be a less expensive way to prevent people from getting severe COVID by treating them with budesonide early on.
Interesting. So I remember when we had survivor Eric Stern on, and he spoke about having his inhaler, like in his desperate hours, he took it, and it seemed to have made a difference for him.
Yeah, he took
Right. But by the same token, people are treated with steroids when they get to the hospital, IV steroids. But it's really important on the timing, because if you give the IV, if you take oral steroids at home too early, it could make you sicker. Because I know that somebody who did that, they took their steroids early. They had COVID, they took steroids at home, and they ended up in the hospital. It made them worse. So the timing is really important. So I don't want people to go out and, start thinking, oh yeah, I have COVID, I don't feel well, let me just hit myself with my inhaler and I'm all good. So
disclaimer.
Really important.
Give me a couple puffs here. Give me a couple puffs.
It's really important to do that with the guidance of a physician.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. So look, we're getting somewhat back to normal. I'm in the music industry by trade, and some of my friends got to play this weekend outdoors at a concert in Florida.
The Seabreeze Jazz Festival,
Seabreeze Jazz Festival. Shout outs to our former guest, Marquel Jordan. He was featured down there. Mesa was on there. Also a guest of Dr. Clarke here on Excuse Me Doctor. And
as they say, friend of the show.
A friend of the show. Look at you with the lingo. So look, I looked at the pictures, and wasn't a whole lot of people wearing masks. They was all crammed together, but they weren't wearing masks. So do we still need to wear masks outdoors?
That's a great question. The CDC is about to come out tomorrow with updated mask guidelines. And the reason why is we know that the risk of outdoor transmission of the coronavirus is really low, but it's not zero. There is some risk. But as more people get vaccinated, that risk is going to go down. We know that the reasons why it's low is because the particles of virus, they get dispersed, they get blown away very quickly with the outdoor air. So the risk of inhaling enough virus, a concentrated, dose of virus, is low when you're outside. Some states are like Florida, which has probably no outdoor mandate, versus Massachusetts, which has very strict outdoor mandates. So I think what's going to happen is the CDC is going to make recommendations for states to adopt when it comes to mask wearing. We know still that indoors, you still have to be distanced and masked. But if you're outdoors, you need to be either distanced or masked. And that's more important when you come to things like the Seabreeze Jazz Festival, where, people are all together trying to get to the stage. You definitely want to have your mask on. If you're at a cookout and people are drinking and having a good time and hugging on each other, even if you're outside, you still want to have your mask on. So we'll see what the CDC says tomorrow. But remember, outdoors, either distanced or masked.
Wow. So Uncle Gus hugging on you, talking about put a little Charlie out, is he need to have a mask on.
If he's hugging on you and he's not vaccinated and you're not vaccinated, yes, that is correct.
Right.
Oh,
Yes.
Right. All right. Good question. Good information. Can't wait to hear what the CDC says. So, Dr. Mill, how do we start young for a healthy heart? What do people get to do?
Yeah, and we talk a lot about COVID, but I really want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that the very reasons, especially in communities of color, why COVID was able to take hold and put a disproportionate number of us in the hospital is because we have underlying conditions like heart disease. They didn't go away with COVID. They're still there. And so as we talk about how to avoid them in the future and make sure our communities are healthier, we really have to start with the kids, with helping our children to build healthy hearts starting in childhood. So there are 5 tips I want to leave you with. One is, if you're a mom, you want to breastfeed your child for as long as possible. Aim for at least a year, actually, if you have the luxury to do that. Number 2, as your child grows, feed them mostly fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, low fat dairy. And, I know when I was a kid, they used to say, you have to clean your plate. You can't get up and go play unless you clean your plate. You don't really necessarily have to say that. Let your child's appetite guide itself. Don't force feed them and require them to finish everything on their plate, and watch portion sizes. The 5th thing, it's easy to stop by McDonald's or Burger King on the way home, because especially they'll be asking for it. But you want to limit, pick a number once a week, fast food, or every Saturday or something like that, because you don't want it to be like an everyday thing, because we know fast food definitely hurts the developing heart. And then the last thing, water is the best beverage of all. And for kids, they could do low-fat milk as well. But you definitely want to stay away from sugary drinks like fruit juices and soda. Fruit juices, especially before the 2nd year of life, absolutely a no-no. So all that stuff, all those 5 tips, really important to ensure that your child's heart, that you start building a healthy heart in childhood.
Great. Good
all
tips.
right. So
So that's it for the weekly recap.
So you do know what's coming next, right?
Yeah.
And we have it right here.
The weekly debunk. Stopping misinformation in its tracks.
So Twitter Tanisha says, taking the vaccines mess with your periods. See, I told y'all it caused infertility.
I ain't touching
But
this.
you have to say about that one.
No, this is out of my area. Y'all handle that.
I don't know about that, Twitter Tanisha. Excuse me, Dr. Mill, is this true?
Well, Twitter Tanisha has a good question. So this one is a little nuanced. So let's jump right on in it. So there have been some anecdotal reports that women have had either earlier, later, or heavier periods following vaccinations. So there's a doctor in the Midwest who said, I'm going to do a study on this. So she's actually in the process of studying to see, is there a link between getting the vaccine and having your periods change. So keep in mind that menstrual changes can happen for a variety of reasons, right? They can happen because of certain diseases, but even simple things like diet changes, more stress, over-exercising, certain medications, even not getting enough sleep, all that can cause changes in your period. So far, there's no data linking the vaccine to changes in the period. But the kicker is this: the trial was not the vaccine trials. None of them were asked the question of women in the trial. So they weren't really designed to collect that data. So that's why this particular doctor in the Midwest is doing this study right now. We know that there is a link between the lining of the uterus, called the endometrium, that we shed every month, and the immune system. Because our uterus is open to the outside world, so there have to be immune cells in our endometrium. So we know that there is that link. But really, I think it's clear that the worst case scenario is if there is a link, it's a temporary thing. It's a one-time thing, sort of like getting a fever, knowing that your immune system is working. So when you get a fever, you get aches, you get headache and chills. That's the way, following the vaccine, that we know our immune system is revving up. And so this change in your period is just, potentially like that. It's a one-time thing. So when you get a fever, it's not like you're permanently hot. If you're going to have a change in your period, women are saying things are coming back to normal in the next cycle or so. So the reason that Tanisha might be off on this one is her conclusion about it causing infertility. So we know that the vaccine contents are destroyed by the body shortly after they reach your cells. So there's no mechanism for any kind of long-term infertility to happen. Furthermore, we know that 23 women who were in the clinical trials got pregnant. And then lastly, the CDC just came out with a study of the 35,000 women who were pregnant who have gotten the vaccine and showed no change in the rate of miscarriages, the rate of pregnancy complications or early births in that group of women. And then on the opposite side of it, we know that catching COVID has a very good chance of affecting your menstrual cycle by affecting your sex hormones. We know that the American College of OBGYN has come out and said pregnant women should get vaccinated if they want to, and that the COVID vaccines do not affect fertility. So I know that was a long explanation. Bottom line, if there is a connection found with periods, it's temporary and there is no long-term fertility effects that we've seen in 35,000 women studied to date.
Great. Good news. Good news,
So
right,
that's
William?
our.
All right, so I didn't have to get into that. So
No, you didn't have to get to that at all.
Tell Tanisha whatever Dr. Clarke said. Twitter,
Okay.
Tanisha.
All right.
See y'all.
Well, that is the weekly debunk. And now let's move on into our producer show for tonight. So, we talked about the vaccines earlier, but one of the things I didn't mention is that vaccination rates are dropping across the United States. They're down like 15% from last week, and we're soon going to be at a place where supply of vaccine may actually outstrip the demand for vaccine. But there's a problem with that. We are nowhere near herd immunity. And what is herd immunity again? It's that place where 70 to 90% of people are vaccinated in a population. And so the virus has nowhere to go. And right now it's looking at like by the summer, we're only going to be at about 65%. So let's do a little refresh of why herd immunity is important. Wayne, can you cue that slide? So what you're looking at are three scenarios. On the left, where just 5% of the population is vaccinated, in the middle, 30%, and on the far right, 75% of people are vaccinated. The dark gray are people who've been vaccinated. The light gray are non-vaccinated people who are healthy. And then the little orange colored dots are people with COVID. So Wayne, please run that simulation. So what you'll see is as the virus spreads in the 5%, it takes up the whole picture. A bunch of people get infected. In the middle scenario with 30%, about half the folks get infected. And then where 75% are quote unquote herd immunity is, that spread is very contained to just a few people. And you can imagine as you get to 80%, 85%, 90%, that's almost non-existent spread in the population. So that's why it's really important to get to herd immunity. But we are leaving shots on the table. So in this producer show, and I'm going to ask Wayne and Lila to come on back and join me, we're going to discuss why we're leaving shots on the table. What should we be doing to address it? Do we have roles as individuals in reaching out to people? Do we have any responsibility to help us as a whole get to herd immunity? So let's jump right on into that. What do y'all think?
So, Dr. Clarke, we came upon this show because, you know, we question. I mean, the news was disappointing this week in that the vaccine rates have slowed down. And I tend to question even what we do here on the show. Is it enough? Are we helping enough? Is it in vain? Because I really want to get back out and be able to socialize again. I want to be able to get back out and work as in entertainment again at venues and play music. And actually, I do play music. I just don't come on camera with Dr. Clarke here. And I want things as normal, what we considered normal again. And so we started to question. It's been a year. Have we made an impact? What can we do to? Is it our responsibility to even go further and try to do more, or should we just, hey, let's move on with our lives and we've done what we can? So that's, I mean, we had.
Well, Lila, yeah, I mean, I think those are some great points, Wayne. And Lila, you mentioned at the beginning, before we came on air, that somebody came door to door knocking on your door. What did you think about that? What were they talking about? Was it Jehovah's Witnesses or?
No.
Hey, man,
it was interesting because she's so funny. It was interesting that it actually happened because we had just had a producer's show, right? To get ready for today. And it came up in one of those conversations about, like, community-led activism, if you will, to get people vaccinated. And one of the things that came up in our discussion was, like, do we really need to go door to door? So, I mean, it was, the timing of it was just impeccable because it happened literally a few hours later. Someone rang my doorbell, and through my Ring camera, I was like, what do you want? He's like, we're just making sure everybody in the neighborhood is vaccinated. He had his clipboard and whatever. And I was like, yeah, you just got to a house that's fully vaccinated. But to answer Wayne's question, I mean, one of his questions, we absolutely have a responsibility. You had a few questions there, sir. We absolutely have a responsibility and an obligation. And I think we've obligated ourselves to, carrying this torch to get as much information and be as much of an influence on our tribe as possible and beyond our tribe. So I'd really like to see some of our viewers in the chat answer those questions. Do we keep going? Do we shift into other topics? What do we do as units to get to herd immunity in terms of influencing our people to get vaccinated?
Well, there's this whole thing about vaccine passports. We haven't talked a lot about it on the show. It's a little bit controversial, but a lot of businesses and well, a lot of businesses are saying that, in order to go see a concert or go to a restaurant or get on an airplane, that you should be vaccinated. So clearly Lila's in favor of that. What about you, Wayne?
All for it.
I'm with Lila. I mean, I really don't want a whole bunch of people coming into a concert venue, which is my home, home away from home. And you're behind, because we can't say the other thing. You're behind. Your donkey is not vaccinated. Because you have a risk, the risk factor of spreading of this treacherous and dangerous disease. I mean, in the music community, we just lost a virtuoso this past week in R&B and gospel music, and it seems that he had COVID, and that kid wasn't over 40 years old.
Wow.
So wow. I mean, you talk about, he may be old to some people, but that's a young man. That's the target audience. And I just want to go back with people, man. And I want to go back, and if I could do this, Dr. Clarke, I want to go back to an early show. And
Okay.
and I want to play something. Lila kind of stole my thunder early, talking about Eric. But that show is one of our favorite shows. It was a Survivor show. And over the past year, I want you to understand that this was probably one of the most heart-wrenching, and I still get emotional thinking about it, people who had COVID. I just want to just play what we're dealing with.
I want to jump right into it, and I'm going to start with Eric. Eric, can you tell us, how did COVID-19 show up in your life?
Like a hurricane.
Wow.
It started, strangely enough, with a pain in my neck, on the left side of my neck, but it wasn't a sore throat. It felt muscular. And I shrugged it off. The next day, that pain went kind of transferred to my whole body, and with debilitating body aches. And I assumed it was the flu, so I went straight to my bed. It continued for a couple of days, and my wife insisted I go get checked for COVID. I'm a 59-year-old asthmatic, so I thought I fit the criterion. I went to the hospital, and they would not test me.
Wow.
They said my symptoms weren't serious enough. I ended up going to another hospital, and they would not test me. So I went from that hospital right to my bed again. And then let me just say I was sick for 7 weeks total before I started feeling 100%.
Wow.
So I got all the symptoms that people read about. I was, I had fever, I had diarrhea, I didn't eat for 2 weeks. I had delirium, I was hallucinating. It was a really kind of, not to overstate it, but it was a really horrible situation.
Wow, that certainly sounds like you had probably the worst of the symptoms. And you're saying that you never got hospitalized.
No,
I know
I
at one
was
point
defiant about that. I was afraid to go to the hospital, frankly, because in mid-March, when I contracted it, there was way too much ambiguity about treatment. And as ridiculous as it sounds, I felt like that's what all the sick people were. So I was having some breathing difficulty, to the point where my wife came into my room. She said my lips were blue. But being an asthmatic, I have experience with prednisone. I've been an asthmatic for a long time. So I ended up taking some prednisone, and I think that really helped me. I wasn't having extreme difficulty by my standards of asthma. So I just toughed it out. And it was, I could not walk up a flight of stairs. I was going from my bedroom to the bathroom, and that's essentially it for a month.
Wow. That's what we're talking about there.
Yeah. So, the stakes are high. I mean, we've lost over 580,000 people, over 75,000 Black people, 1 in 500 Indigenous people. I mean, and the list goes on and on. I mean, we've had this disproportionate affecting of communities, but Caucasians, over 300,000 Caucasians, white Americans have died. I mean, it's affected everybody. But back to that vaccine passport issue, on the one hand, we have all those statistics that I just named, but then on the other hand, can you really say everyone has to do this if it is an emergency use authorization and not fully FDA approved? Some people argue that no, you can't require vaccines if they are not yet fully approved. And all the models that we have to do that thus far with childhood vaccines are in fully approved vaccines. So therein kind of lies the concern. So I think the sooner we're able to get to full authorization, the sooner we'll be able to put that to bed. But I too am in favor of vaccine passports, because I think the consequences, and and the suffering that's happened, as Eric talked about, and as so many others of our survivor shows have talked about, and as the numbers show, is just so staggering. We have to get out of it to be able to get back to normal.
But if I'm the owner of my own restaurant, if I'm the owner of a venue, do I not have the right to say you can't come into my venue unless you've been vaccinated?
You should have that right.
Well,
you should have that right, as well as I should have that right as a performer. As a performer, it is not going to be until performers, restaurateurs, chefs, even, you don't even have to work in there saying, I don't want people in here who are not vaccinated or we're not at herd immunity. When you stop seeing people come, your favorite artists come, and it's going to be hard. I mean, look, universities, I want to pull up, we have one of our viewers, Yvonne, and Yvonne gets on about 12 different platforms. I just want to say, Yvonne, shout out to Yvonne Smith, because if you're the same Yvonne Smith that's on YouTube and Facebook, I don't know how you do it, girl. But not to call you a girl, a woman, young lady. I don't know how you do it, but she says this: major universities are saying you cannot come on campus without the vaccine.
Right. And I think the difference is private entities versus public entities. So will elementary and high schools be able to do it versus private universities and private venues and private businesses? I think that will be probably a deciding factor in all of this as well.
One of the iterations that I've seen that's being suggested for venues in California is like a section for people who are vaccinated, and those people get to sit right next to each other, and then another section for people who are not vaccinated, and they have to distance. Right. And I'm like,
can they be in the nosebleeds? Can the non-vaccinated people be
at the bowl? Can they be up at the top?
Can they be at the top?
You know what I'm saying? So like at a movie theater, how does that work at a movie theater? So the vaccinated
that's what I was going to say. It really depends on how big the venue is. I mean, because if it's a small theater or a small club, I mean, that's not going to work. I mean, that'll work at like, where's that place that they have the Esses Festival down in New Orleans? That'll work in some place like that, like a big stadium. Yeah, the Superdome. But I think for your regular average club, indoor club, that's not going to work. Or even regular concert hall.
Right. What I think is really interesting is the folks who don't want to take the vaccine stay in these streets. Stay in the streets. Don't want to take the vaccine, barely want to wear a mask, and they stay in the streets. And what is amazing to me is if I'm fully vaccinated and he's fully vaccinated and she's fully vaccinated and they're fully vaccinated, but you aren't, you're in danger.
Right.
Yeah.
Anti-vaxxer.
Right.
But that goes over people's heads.
But we're seeing that in Michigan though, where the people that are ending up in the hospital in the ICU are younger because all the older people are vaccinated.
Right.
Like we said, 65% of 65 years and above are vaccinated. They're probably, if you're in the 65-year-old crew, just take your crew. You're probably at herd immunity just by yourselves, right? If y'all were able to go out by yourselves. So fewer older people are ending up in the hospital. So the people that are getting hospitalized from the variants, right, are the people who are younger, 45, 55, etc. So you're absolutely right. Those are the people, if they're not getting vaccinated, who are putting themselves at risk.
So we have one of our longtime listeners and followers, Valerie Spalding. Parker is back, and she says, I think the governor's relaxed restrictions, and she's talking about the governor of Maryland. People are getting complacent. And also J&J temporary pullback may have had some people shook up.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's right. But the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine over 200 million doses given of both those vaccines. And the only serious issue that we've had are allergic reactions. And those allergic reactions are 2 per 1 million for one of those vaccines and 11 per million for the other. So altogether, super, super low and totally treatable. Nobody has died. So, that if it doesn't assure anybody else, that should assure people. And the fact that the FDA and CDC stopped the J&J vaccine and paused it should give some reassurance that at least somebody is watching out and doing their job and is on top of what's happening.
So,
I hope that's what people take away from it.
So also, Kay Williams says restaurants in Adams Morgan in Washington, D.C., that's a section of Washington, D.C., have come together requesting the Mayor Bowser's authority to require patrols show vaccine.
Not Patron. Okay.
I don't know. I might have had some Patron today. Patrons. Come on now,
Okay.
Kay. Don't fool me here. We've got patrons to show vaccine proof, and your butt will be locked up by patrol if you don't show the. Now you're gonna write Now Kay's gonna write patrons in the thing after I already stumbled over it. But I agree with that. I mean, look, I need to feel comfortable around non-vaccinated people. I'm uncomfortable. Are you? And one last thing. This morning, one of my friends had a little meme up that said, "Good morning to everybody except people who wear their mask under their nose." Those people and the unvaccinated people. Everybody else is good morning.
So, but that raises the issue that if you have to show proof, how do you make sure that proof is legitimate? Because didn't you run into a
they all on eBay, eBay,
yeah,
and
So
people are selling vaccine cards.
Case in point, I go into the cleaners, and and I'm talking to my regular folk there, and one of the young ladies doesn't want to get vaccinated. And the person who was vaccinated in the cleaner said she tried to buy my card so she could duplicate it and laminate it. And I just thought that was the most crazy thing I have ever. You want to laminate somebody else. If you don't get the vaccine, just don't get it. Don't get it.
Right.
Well, she probably had to prove to somebody, just like we're talking about, she probably had to prove to somebody that she was vaccinated. Maybe she wants to travel somewhere or, do something go to a restaurant in Adams Morgan in DC. And so she figured she needed a card to do that. But I mean, that brings up the issue of, if we are going to require that, how are we going to make sure that people, that this black market for vaccine cards doesn't, go crazy?
That's wild. That is just wild to me. And
go ahead.
Go ahead, Wayne.
It's going to be a black market for vaccine cards.
It is a black market.
There is already.
There is. It exists. There is a black market for vaccine cards. I want to say this, though, because we're clearly all on the same page. I mean, and this show was created to combat misinformation about COVID, about vaccines and, anything under the COVID umbrella, right? So I'm not trying to bash people who don't want to take the vaccine. However, I don't want my quality of life and my going out and enjoying my life to continue to be what it is, which is non-existent, because I'm being as safe as possible because people don't want to get vaccinated. So there is a question in the comments, Wayne, and I didn't catch the woman's name. I don't remember who asked it, but they ask, how do we influence people to get the vaccine? I mean, if we could answer that, that's the $1 million question, right?
So,
How do you influence your tribe? How do
so,
you influence your colleagues? How do you influence your friends and family?
so let me say this. One of our guests, Michael Eric Dyson, had his own take on it. I'd like to play that now.
We have got to tell the 18 to 40 years old, you are not invincible. And you think you can't get this, you are getting it. And you are dying from this disease. And you are being besieged by this virus. This virus is no respecter of persons. People who are 8 to 80, people who are young, people who are physically fit, people who are doing well have gotten this disease and died. So please don't think that you are invulnerable, that you are invincible, that you somehow can shake this disease off and you'll be fine. So I think we need to go to churches. Again, we need to redouble our efforts. We need to have LeBron James and these basketball stars and these football stars and these people talking about it. I think we need more public service announcements from, the NBA and the NFL and other athletes because they've done a great job, especially in the NBA, of protecting themselves, relatively speaking, when they had the bubble last NBA season. So the thing is that we need sports stars and entertainers and others out here saying, look, we have got to get this vaccine. If you have the possibility of getting it, please get it. And 18 to 40, go to churches, and in these churches, these ministers, these deacons, they need to be passing out information on the offering plate as they pass it for offering. Here is the disease. Here are the facts. Here are how black people are disproportionately dying, and we have got to combat it.
Wow.
Thank you for playing that. And I just have to say that today, Reverend Dyson got his second dose. And I checked in with him, and he is he's doing fine. And
uh-oh, did we lose audio? I think we lost audio on Dr. Clarke. So check your mic there, Dr. Clarke. Did it come loose? There
okay, I am back.
There we go.
So I just wanted to say what I was saying is that I'm really happy that you played that clip, because today Reverend Dyson, Michael Eric Dyson, got his second dose of the Moderna vaccine. I checked in with him and all went well. And he is as passionate today as when we did that interview 3 weeks ago. But I think he brings up some really important points. I mean, that it has to be a community effort, that it has to be the influencers like people in the NBA or the NFA or NFL rather, or musical influencers or fashion influencers or Instagram influencers who reach out and, by example, show that they're okay after taking the vaccine. Or ministers and clergy, which is already happening, or at the level of the White House, they're funding more and more PSAs. They're pushing money out to states and local municipalities to do more and more PSAs, and those are showing up. And then, of course, we have the door-to-door efforts. That's going to be happening in DC as it was happening in LA, and I'm sure many other places around the country. So people are reaching out and stepping up to the plate, thinking outside the box. They're mobile vaccine clinics. So for people that are homebound, you could call a 1-800 number. Somebody will come vaccinate you at your house.
Wow.
They're talking about doing mobile vaccine clinics, setting them up next to popular venues, next to housing complexes, etc. So going where people are and making it convenient for people. So there's a lot of that that's going on. As you all know, I work with the Black Coalition Against COVID. And so we've been really influential from, on the local level, on the federal level, and everything in between, and trying to make sure that the vaccines come to people as opposed to people having to come to the vaccine.
Great. We have a great deal of comments, and I like to read a few, and then we have some questions, Dr. Mel, some good old questions for the doctor that Dr. Mays and I cannot answer. So we for the real doctor. So here we go. I'm going to do them in reverse order. They're not necessarily in order. Pebbles Brown says, Pebbles Brown. Okay, my mouth isn't fixed today. Pebbles Brown says, you can't force anyone to get the vaccine. The best thing is to encourage people to continue to educate themselves. That is what I did consistently until I finally made the decision to get it last month. This show was very instrumental in that decision. Come on now, Pebbles. Give Dr. Mel a hand there. Come on.
Thank you for letting us know that, Pebbles.
And then Kay Williams says, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what side you're on, I see the government making it mandatory. So let's go back to some questions, because there were some questions early on. And I saw a question by someone we haven't read a question from in a while, and that's Ellen Claire Lamb. She said, I scheduled a mammogram, but the radiology assistant said I should wait at least 6 weeks after receiving my vaccine. Why is this?
So it's not a hard and fast rule, but what happens is when you get vaccinated on the same side that you get vaccinated in, you sometimes develop swollen lymph nodes, or what people call swollen glands, under your arm. And when you're trying to read a mammogram, if those swollen lymph nodes show up on the mammogram, it's unclear whether that's due to breast cancer, which is what the mammogram is trying to rule out, or if it was due to something temporary like a vaccine. So they're encouraging people to either get your mammogram before you get vaccinated, or wait 4 to 6 weeks after you get your mammogram to get vaccinated. But great question, Claire. Thanks.
Okay. Conchita Mays says, is it true that a COVID-19 pill is being created to cure COVID?
I don't know of a pill per se. I know that there's a lot of research going on in a lot of different avenues in terms of antivirals, in terms of antibodies, anti-inflammatories that help to either address the virus itself or the symptoms from the virus. But I don't know of a COVID pill per se.
Okay. Marv West says, I have received both Pfizer vaccines. I heard recently the third Pfizer vaccine will be required in 6 months. Yes or no?
I have heard that there is research along that area. Happy birthday, Marv. And thank you for tuning in. And yes, there is a strong possibility that a booster will be required, but the results of the trial have not been finalized. In other words, the question of, is a booster necessary, is still being settled through the clinical trial process. So we should know in a few months if it is indeed necessary. What we do know now is that after 6 months, we know that there is still immunity in people who have been vaccinated. So 90% of the people have protection against COVID-19 after 6 months. So we'll see at 9 months and at a year what that looks like. And they're going to be continuing to follow people for a total of 2 years who were in that original trial. But the reason we know 6 months is it's been 6 months since the end of the trial. So 6 months of people being enrolled in the trial thus far. And that's why we have that data.
Okay. Lila, you have any questions there? Did you see? You want to pick up?
I saw something about sending kids back to school.
Yeah, that was Valerie Spalding Parker. Here we go. I'm concerned about the pressure to send children back to school. Do you think we're ready for full school attendance yet?
No. I think what we are ready for is partial school attendance, depending upon vaccination rates in the community spread, and the same mitigation factors that have been recommended, which is distancing in school, which is going to require probably half the school being in class at any one time. The use of outdoor spaces, making sure that ventilation is up to snuff, making sure that windows open in facilities. And I know a lot of that money that came down from the federal and states to local school districts have yet to be used to upgrade all of our school facilities equally. So those that are ready to go and are in low community spread areas where people are getting vaccinated, go for it in a measured way. Those school facilities that are not up to snuff, that are in high spread areas, no, I would say wait until community spread comes down, wait until the school facility is fully prepared and ready to go to be able to accept children in a safe way, children, staff, and teachers in a safe way.
Okay. We have one from Elizabeth Yates. I was diagnosed with fibroglandular breast. This has not happened before. It was a breast on the side. I received both my vaccines. I had to have several tests. Should I be concerned about breast cancer now?
So when you have that diagnosis, typically what it means is there's a thickness of the breast tissue. And sometimes a mammogram by itself won't pick it up. It's important to get a follow-up ultrasound. So I would make sure that you talk with your doctors who are doing it to make sure that they're able to visualize the breast tissue adequately and be able to see using the mammogram. And if not, to make sure that you get a follow-up ultrasound. I have not heard that is related to the vaccination. What we've talked about, as I mentioned before, is swollen glands on that side, which are only under the armpit. They're not in the breast tissue itself. But again, make sure that you talk with your doctors so that they can continue to do the appropriate tests. A lot of times that condition can develop with age, with hormonal changes. So it's not necessarily, yes, this is related to breast cancer in any way.
To piggyback on that, not in answer form, but in a question form. I had a swollen gland, but it wasn't under my arm. It was definitely on the same side as my shot, but it was around my collarbone.
Yes.
So it can happen in other places, yes?
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing it up. Actually, when I got a flu vaccine one year, I got a swollen gland on the same side right above my collarbone. And the beautiful thing about our body is we have lymph nodes in just about everywhere in our body, very, spaced out all the way up the side of our neck, on our collarbones, under our arm, in our groin, even in the crease of our elbows and the crease of our knees. So, and then of course behind our neck. So they're in a lot of different places. The reason why under the breast and above the collarbone are the most common ones those are the ones that drain the skin around typically the area where you get vaccinated. So yes, it is possible to get above the collarbone swelling as well with a lymph node.
So we are
sorry my answers are so long, but I think the body is just so cool. I love to talk about it.
So we're at the end of the show, but I would like to read this before I go, because I came on with the question, is this show relevant? Are we even relevant? And Cynthia I.O. Edwards says, I think the show is very important, educational, and can shift with the times. We're now moving into a paradigm of those who are not getting vaccinated or only one shot and they skip the second. This will create a whole new set of issues that can be discussed on the show and continue to raise awareness and educate. There are issues and potential concerns we don't even know of yet. So
excellent point, Io. Thank you for that. And I think on that note, it's just to remind us that, saying, we've been building the plane as we fly it, because none of us have ever been through a pandemic before. And, even the anti-vaxxers have a role in this, right? everybody is trying to feel their way. And so I never discourage people from asking questions, especially when it comes to your body. It means that you're empowered. But by the same token, we have to be prepared, number one, to receive the information that are facts, and not go to social media to try to fill that void if we feel that we're not getting the facts, because that's where all the misinformation lies. And secondly, when it comes to getting the choice to get vaccinated, I think it's important for us to remember that it's not only an individual decision. It's a decision that affects your family. It's a decision that affects the community. It's a decision that affects basically the entire world, because this is a global pandemic. And the only way that we're ultimately going to be able to move forward as a human family out of it is if, you know, it magically goes away, which we know that it's not going to do that, or we all get vaccinated so that the virus doesn't have a host to live in. So with that, I want to thank my wonderful co-producers for a great producer's show. Thank you, Lila. Thank you, Wayne.
Good to be here.
I want to thank my audience. I want to thank the audience for tuning in with the great comments and questions. I will be tomorrow morning on the Russ Parr Morning Show, 8:50, if you're awake on the East Coast, to tune in. And if I don't see you between now and next Monday, when we will be back on YouTube and Facebook. Oh, wait a minute. Very important. I forgot to mention, next week, we're also going to be streaming on blackdoctor.org. So you can catch us there at the same time.
Wow.
And we have a really special episode coming up. So I know you're not going to want to miss it. So I will see you all.
We're already over. We're already over time. And somebody said, talk about your book.
Okay.
Mention your book. Just mention the book.
All right. Excuse me, doctor. I've got what? Taking ownership of your health and making healthcare work for you was the impetus for this show. As I said, it's all about making you an empowered healthcare consumer and your best health advocate for you and for your loved ones. Talks about how to first understand your body and how it works, and how to take care of it. And then when you have to deal with the healthcare system, whether it's Western medicine or Eastern medicine, how to navigate through it. And so you can pick it up at Dr. Melissa Clarke or on Kindle or Amazon. So until I see you, pick up the book. And remember, please be wise, be well, and be health empowered.